بعد نفلتنا.
الحرب طبعا خلتني أفقد ابني، ما ودعته.
الحرب خلفت لي إصابة في رجلي.
الحرب خربت بيتنا.
محرقة.
الحرب خلتني أفقد ابن خالي.
الخوف.
الموت.
شتتتنا وخلتنا نعيش في خيام.
خسارة.
دمار.
500 سنة لورا.
1 year of Israel's war on Gaza has cost the lives of more than 40,000 people, including at least 16,000 children. The names you see scrolling on my left are of those killed over the course of the past 12 months, those who were retrieved from the rubble and identified, that is. Men, women, children, and the elderly whose lives stood in the way of Israeli military and colonial objectives. The list of the dead amount to a 649-page document. The first 14 pages are babies. Their names are also there. For now over 365 days, Israel has dropped 2,000-pound American bombs all over Gaza, including on displacement camps and so-called safe zones. And experts believe that the names you see here are a massive underestimation. I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream. Israel's assault on Gaza has had implications far beyond the borders of the enclave, and it's changing the way we see the world around us. Elected officials' failure to confront Israel while their constituents demanded a ceasefire prompted many to act. Groups organized to try and alleviate the suffering of those stuck in Gaza. Others called on the boycott, divestment, and sanctions of companies supporting Israel, and others still decided to go for more creative, direct forms of protesting, including Medea Benjamin from Codepink. She's back with us today. Medea, thank you so much for joining us here once again in The Stream. We've seen you protesting everywhere over the course of the past 12 months, doorstepping U.S. Congress, people entering the U.S. Congress, and yet during this time that you've been asking the U.S. to stop funding Israel, the country actually continues sending Israel money and weapons, $44.5 billion US dollars from October last year through September this year, to be exact. How does this make you feel?
It makes me feel like this is not a democracy, that we don't have officials who represent us. When you see the changing opinion polls over the last year, the number of people who want to stop sending weapons has gone up and up, despite what they hear in the mainstream media in the United States. So now it is a majority. The last poll was 61%. And when you look at young people, it's an overwhelming 77%. They don't want to keep sending weapons, and yet our Congress keeps authorizing more weapons. So we feel unrepresented, but we're not going to stop. In fact, we keep going every single day into the halls of Congress, as well as to some of their homes. We go to the White House, the State Department, everywhere they're speaking. So we are determined to force them to represent the people, not the big lobby groups like AIPAC or the Christian Zionists, or even the weapons industry that has made many, many billions of dollars over this past year.
Would you say that one of the consequences of this war is this big awakening in terms of revealing just how profound, how large the disconnect really is between people and those in power?
Absolutely. It's been something that we've been working to expose when we try to catch members of Congress on their way to votes. And we ask them things like, what do you think of the bombing of Lebanon? What do you think of the genocide in Gaza? And they say, kill them all, things like that. I mean, people are appalled and they wonder, who are these monsters who are representing us? How did they get into power? And they start looking at the larger question that it's not just about Gaza, it's about U.S. policy in general. I think this has been a huge awakening for many people, especially for young people in this country. And that's one of the positive things, one of the very, very small silver linings we can say, is that people understand now that this two-party system does not serve the interests of the people of the United States, much less the people of the Middle East.
Medea, thank you so much for being back with us here on The Stream.
Thank you for inviting me.
And speaking of direct action and putting bodies on the line, earlier this year, students across the US and the UK started camping out in front of their universities, demanding the disclosure of the investments in Israel and the divestment from entities, financial and cultural, that supported the occupation of Palestine. The peaceful encampments sparked a global movement and emerged as a space of debate and community, but also of artistic expression of the frustration everyone shared.
Yeah, the people, they won't leave. What is threatening about divesting and one piece? The problem isn't the protests, it's what they're protesting. It goes against what our country is funding. Block the barricade until Palestine is free. Block the barricade until Palestine...
For a good month, our social media feeds played this song as a soundtrack to the students in the encampments, and among them was Kendall Gardner, who went viral for eloquently listing the demands of the movement. She's back with us today to discuss where to from here. Kendall, thank you so much for joining us again. One of the most remarkable things that I remember from those protests was actually the response to them. I remember the brutal response, especially from the US police. Can you tell us what that taught you in terms of freedom of expression and law enforcement?
Yeah, so what I'll say is that universities don't actually have a problem with freedom of expression. They have a problem with Palestine and anyone who stands in solidarity with Palestine and with the Palestinian resistance. At the University of Oxford, we were frequently told that of the utmost importance was academic freedom. And what that really meant was that genocidal viewpoints were welcome on our campus. There's no issue when Zionist students, faculty, and staff express support for Israel and its genocide in Gaza and the expansion of that genocide into Lebanon and Syria and Yemen. The university only has a problem when students are calling out the university's own complicity in that genocide and in settler colonialism writ large. And so in tandem with that, I learned that the law enforcement only serves to protect the institutions that enable colonialism and violence. I was never safe when the police were around. All the police did was enact violence upon student protesters and really threaten the community that we'd built within the encampment. What the police serve to do is calcify this class system, this racialized class system that serves to protect Israel and its interests at the end of the day. And so I learned a lot about how the university would align itself with this law enforcement in order to protect the institutions that it upheld, the institutions of Israeli genocide.
And those encampments, that movement, died down for now. Where to from here?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, what we must do is continue to escalate and find ways to put new pressure on the university and the system that it protects. By the end of the encampment, it was clear that the university had found a way to sort of work around us. We were no longer disrupting university life simply by existing on the lawns of the university. And so what I think we need to do as a global student movement is find new and creative ways to continue to disrupt and apply pressure on our universities. It's not an exaggeration at all to say that the University of Oxford and its peer institutions are profiting off the death and destruction of its own students and their families' lives. As Oxford continues to invest in Israeli apartheid and in the weapons manufacturing industry, students from Oxford are living in Lebanon. Their families are in Gaza. Their families are in Yemen. And so we can't stop. The students have a duty, a historic duty, an international duty, as we all do, to disrupt what we have access to. And as a student, what I have access to is the university system. And so I see it as my responsibility to disrupt that status quo. There is no education as normal, no business as normal as the genocide continues. And I mean, we're here marking a year of genocide. Clearly, nothing has stopped. If anything, it's increasing. The violence is getting worse. And so we must, too, increase our pressure on these institutions.
And we will continue following your actions. Kendall, thank you so much for coming back to the stream.
Thank you for having me.
And Hind's Hall, Macklemore's bold pro-Palestine anthem, gained a sequel in homage to all those still resisting and vowing to carry on.
In our lifetime we will be free. One day when the light shines we will be free. In our lifetime we will be free. And they can bury us, but they will find out we are seeds.
Singer and songwriter Anelise, who co-authored Hin's Hall 2, spoke to us about how the past year has changed him and what it means to be a seed.
This past year has changed my life in so many ways, but I mean, the main way is that the priorities in my life have completely been realigned. Nothing matters but liberation. Nothing matters but humanity. These are the things that matter. All the other things that distract us, the materialism, the commercialism, the algorithm, they don't really matter. Humanity is like the sole focus, as I think it should be. I still use my platform because Palestine's not free. Lebanon's still being bombed. The Congo and Sudan are still not free. The people in the United States in many areas are still not free. And really, until there is freedom, until there is liberation, there is never a question of should we continue to use our voice. We must continue to use our voice and our actions and our platforms and our privilege until freedom reigns. Not just here, but everywhere. Is the job's not done? Don't stop. Don't stop using your words. Don't stop using your actions, your heart, your passion. Let it pour forth for the people in Palestine until liberation, until the occupation and the genocide are over. Don't stop.
Over the course of 12 months of Israel's air offensive and ground operations, Palestinians across Gaza were displaced multiple times, many improvising settlements in designated safe zones, hoping for some respite from the violence. But on May 26, the Israeli Air Force bombed one such displacement camp in Rafah, setting tents on fire while entire families slept in them. Ahmad al-Najjar, an 18-month baby, was among the casualties. Images of his father holding his decapitated body etched on our minds forever. An online movement, All Eyes on Rafah, emerged as a call to action for the world to take note of what was happening in Gaza. 50 million accounts shared this AI-generated image. Surely a red line had been crossed. Something was going to happen. That's when Farrah Koutteineh, the founder of Key 48 Return, joined us for the first time, and she's back with us today. Farrah, thank you so much for coming back to the stream. I wanted to ask you, since that tent massacre, so many other atrocities were committed. I wonder if your work, which focuses on trying to make Gaza and everything that happens there, but also the occupation in general, more palatable, perhaps, to audiences that are not familiar with the story. Has your work become more difficult?
Definitely. I mean, absolutely. The work has become more difficult because people are becoming more apathetic to the horror that we are witnessing through our screens. And also as a Palestinian in the diaspora, I can only describe it as being more eye-opening, because nothing compares to the reality of living through a genocide that Palestinians are living through right now all across Palestine. And, you know, what has really opened my eyes the past few months and making these posts online and trying to bring awareness and make this information palatable, what has become abundantly clear, if it wasn't clearer, you know, throughout the past 77 years, what's become abundantly clear in the past year is just how worthless the world views Palestinian life. And just a few days after the Rafah massacre, which showed how the world really doesn't care when it's Palestinian babies being beheaded, and they only care when, you know, it's the lies and the disinformation about Israeli settler babies being beheaded. They only cared about that. They don't care about the Palestinian babies that are beheaded by Israeli bombs. And what we saw a few days after the Rafah massacre was the Nusayrat Eid massacre, where over 300 Palestinians were murdered in the space of minutes to extract 4 Israeli settler hostages from Gaza. And that makes the life conversion rate of Palestinians to Israeli settlers unthinkable. Are we actually saying in 2024 that the lives of 300 Palestinians equal the lives of 4 Israeli settlers? Is it 1 Israeli settler's life? Is that the equivalent of 75 Palestinians? And that's what's become more eye-opening over the past few months and made my work harder, is just realizing that my life in the diaspora, my life in, you know, in Palestine or wherever it may be as a Palestinian, is regarded as less valuable than that of an Israeli settler.
It is absolutely not. We regard your life with a lot of value. Thank you so much, Farrah Koutteineh, for joining us here on the stream today. Thank you for coming back, and thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you for inviting me back.
And as we speak, across Gaza, tens of thousands of people remain in tents, scrambling without access to proper food or sanitation. Imagine that, with the added challenge of not having a limb.
صوبت في تاريخ 2018 في 3/5، وتم إطلاق النار على حدود قطاع غزة. اتصابت، أكلت تقريبا يعني 6 إطلاق في رجلي، وظلتني مرمي يمكن أبو 10 دقايق. بدأت الحرب ونزحنا من بيتنا وطلعنا على جنوب غزة على خان يونس. هذا كان أول نزوح طبعا. كانت المعاناة يعني مش طبيعية، وما زالت المعاناة احنا يعني بنمارسها ونتعايش معها. معاناة المية، نقل المية وشغلات كتير طبعا. وبعديها كمان نزحت من خان يونس على رفح، وهينا عايشين في خيام نازحين. ويعني نزحنا كذا مرة، مش مرة، مرتين وثلاثة. نزحنا على من خان يونس على رفح، من رفح على الوسطى، ولسه هينا يعني بننزح.
It was still the end of May when we saw the Israeli military questioned for its actions, perhaps for the first time, in the genocide. On May 26th, the massacre of civilians in that displacement camp in Rafah had members of the military justifying a targeted operation. But on May 27th, Netanyahu acknowledged a tragic mistake.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today calling it a tragic mishap.
We are operating in Rafah in a very targeted and precise way.
We seek to go after Hamas and limit civilian casualties.
But you don't know how many civilians you're killing.
The war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza.
We're not targeting civilians. We're targeting Hamas.
Israel's use of overwhelming and often indiscriminate force in areas where civilians are sheltering.
And what you just saw there were elements of what's become known as Hasbara, a communication technique, but also a diplomacy tool to justify Israel's actions, even when that justification defies any logic or morality. Katherine Bogen has been an avid observer of that technique and joined the stream earlier to help us unpack it. She's back with us today. Katie, thank you so much. Hasbara is just effective because it plays with our psychic, right? Can you remind us just some of the techniques that are actually used here?
Absolutely. I mean, Hasbara relies on a scaffolding of different tactics that really tap into the psyche. It builds on theory of social behavior, use of very specific targeted language, manipulation tactics, weaponization of existing trauma, and really demands that people ignore the discomfort of their cognitive dissonance, that they ignore the data that's presented in front of their faces in order to establish a new schema for what is considered right or what is considered normal. And one of the bases for Hasbara to function is called the just world hypothesis. And this is a belief that a lot of us are taught from childhood, as early as we can remember learning a moral lesson, that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. It's this idea of sort of heaven or hell, or if we think of, Christmas, if you're a good kid, you're going to get a gift. If you're a bad kid, you're going to get coal. Therefore, if something horrific happens to a group of people, that just world belief is already in the back of our minds, making us believe that this group of people is somehow deserving. And so Israel has been able to rely on the just world belief to make people believe that Palestinians have somehow earned this collective punishment, this abuse and this brutality. And it coalesces with the idea that violence in wartime is inevitable, and therefore the targets are responsible for its prevention. They're responsible for their own protection. We see this overlap with language like human shields, which invokes a humanizing word followed immediately by dehumanization. And then I think the biggest partnership to be aware of is the partnership between the just world hypothesis and DARVO, this psychological manipulation tactic of deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. So, no, we didn't bomb the hospital. This was a dysfunctional Hamas rocket. They were actually trying to attack us. Even if we attacked the hospital, it was because it was being used as a base and we're the real victims here. So you have this sense of, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people occurring in the background. And then at the fore, you have this DARVO technique that's being used. And I think an example of this that I found very salient is the idea that, nothing justifies October 7th, but somehow October 7th justifies everything since.
Israel seems to be using the same language, the same arguments here. How long until actually people see through it and see Israel's true intentions?
I think we're watching the lies of the Zionist project begin to fall apart. If this were just about establishing a Jewish homeland, Israel wouldn't currently be bombing 4 separate countries. They wouldn't be beginning a ground invasion into Lebanon and reaching into Yemen. Folks are starting to see that this idea of greater Israel isn't about Jews or Jewish safety at all. It's about colonial expansion. And part of the evidence that we can garner from this is every time Israel behaves as an aggressor on a global stage, Jews across the world suffer. Anti-Semitism against Jews outside of Israel does increase. And so this idea that the Zionist project is somehow going to maintain Jewish safety is falling apart before our very eyes. And I've had experiences just in my own community of watching the language used toward Israel and the Zionist project shift, where immediately after October 7th, people were very eager to defend Israeli aggression. And at this point, I'm getting calls and Instagram messages from folks I grew up with, from people in my Jewish community saying, okay, I've seen you talking about this for a year plus the last decade that I was involved now. Can you clarify some things for me? And so the cognitive dissonance is getting sticky enough for people that they are seeking social resources from folks in their communities.
Katie Bogen, thank you so much for being part of the stream again.
It is my responsibility and honor. Thank you so much for the incredible reporting that y'all are doing.
And Palestinians have for decades attempted to counter this sophisticated technique of Hasbara. And for that, they have mostly invested in educating their own people on their culture and history. According to a panel of UN experts, the foundations of Palestinian society are being reduced to rubble because of Israel's systematic pattern of violence against educational institutions in Gaza. Muhannad Ayyash, a professor of sociology at Mount Royal University, joined the stream recently to talk about that, and he is back with us today. Muhannad, thank you so much for being part of the stream. We discussed the importance of education for Palestinians last time you joined us, and considering that when you bomb a school, a university, you actually destroy much more than a physical building, right? What is the extent of what's been lost in Gaza so far?
It's really difficult to measure. The damage is so large that it is immeasurable. We're talking about years of research, years of knowledge cultivation, knowledge production, creative works, networks of people working together, relationships forming between researchers, between professors and students, among students, between the university staff and the community. All of that has been destroyed over the last years in a deliberate attack on Palestinian education. So it's really difficult to measure all of the destruction, but we're talking about everything from the creative arts to practical sciences to theoretical works to theology to political analysis, economic analysis, social analysis, legal analysis, you name it. The Israeli state is continuously shattering the Palestinian dreams and hopes. And the impact of that is generational. We're going to be feeling the impacts of this for generations to come.
It's really sad. Thank you so much, Muhannad, for coming back to the stream today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
As we broadcast this episode, we wonder how much more the people of Gaza will be able to endure. We certainly hope this won't last another year. And a reminder that this has been going on for 12 months and 76 years. The occupation of Palestine and the dispossession of Palestinians have been every bit as violent as the bombs dropped. Here at the stream, we will continue connecting with the people in Gaza, but also in the occupied territories, especially now that a regional conflict seems to be the new reality. We won't stop telling this story. Once again, we would like to thank our guests who made this episode possible, and thank you all for tuning in. Your opinion is very important to us. If you like this show or if you have a suggestion for a next episode, keep in touch on social media. Use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we will look into your ideas. Take care, and I'll see you soon.